Okay, in this exercise we are going to practice how to use layer masks and a few other tools to put a giraffe's head on top of a flamingo's body. Let's start by opening up our giraffe image that you can find in the exercise. I'm going to zoom in a little bit and isolate the giraffe's head. I'm going to start by using a layer mask, and a layer mask is nothing more than an editable selection. So I'm going to use one of our previous selection tools. Probably the easiest for this case is the magnetic lasso, which you can get from the menu by clicking and holding and selecting the last one here. As you remember, the magnetic lasso is going to automatically trace our image for us. So I'm going to start on the back of the shoulder here and go all the way up around. I don't have to get it perfect right now. It's okay if there's a few errors. We're going to be able to clean those all up with layer masks. I'm just going to do a quick pass here and try and get the whole head, neck, all that. Okay, not perfect. Going to stop right around here, going to draw it back to where I started and click on the selection. Now in order to convert this from a selection to a layer mask, all we need to do is go to our layers panel over here and select this button that is the layer mask button. It's a rectangle with a circle inside of it, there you can see. And if we click that, it is going to now convert this into a layer mask. What's happened, everything hasn't been deleted. You can see in the preview that the rest of the image is still there. And if we shift and click on our layer mask icon here, it will hide it. And you can see that everything's still there. We didn't delete it. Simply, we laid this mask down to show what we wanted to see and what we wanted to hide. And the cool part now is that we can edit this. Before we start to clean up our selection though, let's give ourselves a solid white layer beneath the giraffe so that we can see what's going on. We can do that a couple different ways, but let's go to the menu, layer, new layer. Going to call this white. And I'm going to go to edit, fill, and I could select foreground color because white is my foreground color, but I'm just going to select white here. And I'm going to fill that in, and I'm going to drag this underneath our existing layer. So I can see there's a couple of places where I didn't get it perfectly, where there's a little bit too much sky or a little bit of giraffe eaten away here. So we are now going to go in and start to clean up our layer mask, because layer masks are a non-destructive way of editing, in that these pixels are still here, we can still get them back. We haven't deleted them, we just need to decide what we want to show and hide. So we're going to start editing the layer mask by selecting not only our layer, but the layer mask itself. You can see these little white brackets. We want to make sure that the image is not selected, but the layer mask itself is selected. We can edit our mask with a number of different tools, but the simplest one is going to be the brush. It's just like the eraser, but instead of erasing, it paints in colors. So let's select that from our menu bar down here, or by clicking B for brush. Just like the eraser, it is a brush tool. We can decide how big or small and how hard or soft our brush is going to be. But unlike the eraser tool, when we paint in white using this brush, it is going to make things appear, and when we paint in black, it's going to erase them. So I'm going to undo that. We can change what colors we are seeing using the foreground and background colors. So with black active, it's going to erase things. Black is going to hide them in the mask. But if I click this little switch here, it will make white the foreground, and I can bring anything back. So anything that we deleted before is actually still there, and we can get it all back. I'm going to undo that though. But what we really want to do now is go zoom in a little bit and clean up some of these details, some of the obvious ones. So I'm going to get myself a slightly smaller brush now that shouldn't be nearly as fuzzy, but maybe a little bit fuzzy. And I want to make sure that I have black active, because I want to get rid of this extra piece of sky. So I'm going to go and just erase that little part, and a couple other little pieces in here. Doesn't have to be perfect. We'll see what it looks like in our other image, but I want to bring back this little bit of neck here. So I can click this switch, or I can select X on my keyboard. We'll switch this back and forth, quick shortcut. So with white selected, I can paint back in my giraffe neck. I went a little bit too far, so I'm going to switch it back to black now, and I'm going to paint away. This is the key concept, that black is going to remove things and white is going to bring them back. So that's going to be pretty good for now. I'm going to remove this part too. A little bit down here, anything super obvious at this point. And I'm going to get rid of this piece of sky. That's going to be pretty good for now. So we're going to switch gears and open up our flamingo image, because we want to get that giraffe head within the flamingo. So for starters, we need to pull these two tabs apart so we can get this giraffe from one to the other. So I'm going to pull and remove and release there. Now with my giraffe image selected, I'm going to make sure I select the giraffe head, which I'm actually going to call giraffe head. I'm going to click and drag this layer into my flamingo image. Okay, I'm going to hide this previous giraffe and make this screen a little bit bigger. So for starters, we can see there are a couple places where we probably need to clean this up a little bit, but let's position this giraffe's head first, because it's both way too big and it's facing the wrong direction. So let's start by bringing up the free transform by hitting Command plus T. Because this image is so big, it's not just the giraffe's head, but we've got the entire image masked. Everything's a little bit far away to get these handles. So I'm going to transform from the menu bar. First I'm going to click the lock to make sure it scales proportionally, and I'm going to make this 35% or so. That should be pretty close, and I can make a few final adjustments. And now I'm going to right-click or control-click on that layer with transform still active, and I'm going to flip horizontal so that my giraffe head is facing in the right direction. Before I apply my transformation, though, I want to rotate a little bit. I'm not going to worry about where the flamingo head is right now, but what I want to optimize for is where the giraffe's body is connecting. I want to get sort of the front of the neck lined up with the front of the neck here, and I want to get the back lining up with the back a little bit. So with this still at about 35%, I'm actually going to apply my transformation before I line it up perfectly. Before I can really get it perfectly in place, I kind of need to be able to see through it and what's behind it. And with that 100% opacity, I can't do that. So with my giraffe head layer selected, I'm going to select the opacity and change it from 100% to 50%. Now I can see through this layer, which makes it a lot easier to adjust. I'm going to again bring up the free transform with Command T. And I'm going to rotate and adjust as needed. So again, I'm going to try and line up the front of the giraffe's neck with the front of the flamingo's neck, and the back of its mane here kind of with the back of the flamingo's body. So I think this is pretty good now, and I'm going to apply my transformation. Before I proceed, I'm going to clean up this selection a little bit now that I can see sort of where it's fitting in place. So I'm going to select the layer mask specifically. I'm going to bring up my brush tool again, and I'm going to remove some of the parts here that I know aren't going to be seen. So I'm going to kind of clip it to the flamingo's body. Make sure it's really not extending beyond the flamingo. I want it to fit there. And it fits pretty well on top, so I'm going to leave that. I'm going to bring my opacity back up to 100%, and I'm going to do one final pass and see if there's any other details of the giraffe to perfect with maybe a little bit sharper of a brush. Got a little bit of white here. I want to make sure I can't see my previous background at all. Head's looking pretty good. Little bit of white in the mane here that's kind of distracting. Kind of need a softer brush though. And there. Okay. Okay. Now to remove the flamingo head, so that we've only got one head. For starters, I'm going to zoom in a little bit. I'm going to turn off the giraffe head. I am going to select the background layer and grab my rectangular marquee tool, or M. And I'm going to draw a box around my flamingo head with a bit of breathing room, a little bit of room on either side. I'm going to double check that this covers the area I need to cover, looking good. And with the background layer selected and my selection active, I'm going to right-click and select Layer via Copy. Now we've got this extra little piece here, and we're going to do our head removal here, just in case we screw anything up and we need to go back and try it again. So the tool we're going to be using for this is called the Clone Stamp tool. You can get it from the menu here, or with the letter S. The Clone Stamp tool is pretty cool. It's a brush tool like the eraser or the brush, but instead of painting a color or erasing, we define a point on our image, And then when we move our cursor, it's going to pull from that point and paint whatever it finds there. We first need to make sure that we've got, from the menu here, all layers selected, so that it doesn't just pull from this one little layer we've got, but it pulls the background image as well. What we're going to do is hold down the Option key, and our cursor is going to change into this little target now. When we click this target, it's going to define the source point. So I'm going to click right here, off to the right of the head a little bit. I'm going to move my cursor, and as I do, you can see a little preview of what it's going to paint. And if I click and move, you can see that the cursor is going to paint the sky that's over there. You can see that as I move my cursor around, that X is going to follow and paint as well. I should have said, too, we definitely want a very soft brush for doing this cloud painting. Otherwise, we're going to see a lot of edges. So I can do a little before and after now and turn on and off and see, does this look believable? Does that look real? I think it's decent. Wouldn't hurt to do another try, probably, but it's believable enough. It's pretty soft. And when I turn my giraffe head on now, I can see that the flamingo head is hidden, and we can't see what's behind there, which is great. Very last step that we're going to do now, to make this a little bit more realistic, now that everything's fitting together, is we're going to blend these two animals a bit. You can still really see where the giraffe ends, and it's very bright and very obvious. So we're going to select our giraffe head layer mask. We're going to bring up our brush tool with the letter B. Definitely going to get a big and a soft brush going. And what I'm going to do, instead of just painting away immediately, even though I want to make sure I've got black up because I do want to remove, first I'm going to lower the opacity of the brush itself. Rather than every time I click brush, rather than it being 100%, I'm going to make it just 50% right now. This is going to help me. Now I'm going to do even softer. I'm going to do like 25%. Every time I click, it's going to only remove 25% of the image, which means that I can click over and over a couple times, and every time I'm going to click and drag, it's getting softer and it's blending more and more. So the end result that I want is for this pattern to, fade into the flamingo a little bit. I think I might have gone a little bit too far, though, because you can start to see the flamingo showing up in here. So I'm going to go and touch up with a little bit of white just to make sure that it's blending a bit more smoothly. I'm going to try not to make any other white show, but the end result, by switching back and forth between white and black and using a low opacity brush, is that I can create this even blend from 100% to 0% in making a nice smooth gradient so that it's a bit more believable. And that is how we created our flamingo with a giraffe's head. I'm going to make sure that my layers are all named. Removing the head, and I'm going to save it and be done.